All right, today, RotoWire Fantasy Football Show, we're going to be breaking down the biggest needs of the NFL teams and matching them with one ideal prospect heading into the 2025 NFL Draft. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by Ultra GM. I'm Jim Coventry, joined by Anthony Cervino. Now, today's show is going to include team needs on offense. You'll find out where players like Ashton Genty, Luther Burden, Colson Loveland, where they should go during the 2025 NFL Draft. Now, as Anthony and I go through these teams, there's a number of teams that we believe they're going to focus on either defense or the offensive line. For those teams, we're not going to project the key offensive rookie. Certainly, these teams could change course and do that. They could take some later in the draft. But we're going to focus on a little more of the highlight names and teams that really have a pressing need. So with that, Anthony Cervino, we will begin with the NFC West. And with the Cardinals, look, the Cardinals, when we think about them, they probably need offensive line more than anything else. It's a really, really bad offensive line. There is definitely a chance they could go with some skill positions. They have Michael Wilson, though, at the Z. They can't be too upset with him. Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride, James Conner, they're fine. Anything quick on the Cardinals?
Yeah, I mean, is there a world where maybe they do address the wide receiver position? We like Michael Wilson, but maybe they want an upgrade there. I could see it, but this is a team that's probably going to go on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll say is this. We know they had Greg Dortch playing the slot, but they went really heavy two tight end sets in the second half of the season, and that's where the offensive identity will lie. Elijah Higgins is their second tight end, and he does his job well. So I don't think they're in a market for a lot of receiver depth, so we definitely have that to consider. So let's move on to a team we're going to give something on, the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the Seattle Seahawks, remember, in the offseason, they got rid of Geno Smith, set him to the Raiders. They brought in Sam Darnold. Again, pressure is a major problem for him. Not excited about that. But what I think the Seahawks need, Anthony, is they need a stretch Z receiver. Now, the Z receiver, I say him, that's the receiver that lines up a little bit off the line of scrimmage, so he usually gets a free release, but somebody really fast. Now, the Seahawks pick 18th in the first round. They have 2 second-round picks, 50 and 52, but I think that first-round pick, and it might be a tad early, but it's where you pick. I think Matthew Golden is a really good fit for them. Remember, they have Jackson Smith and Jigba, who played about 74% slot last year. They brought in Cooper Kupp, who's kind of near the end, in my opinion, but they need some deep speed. And Sam Darnold, if they use play action, can throw deep. Remember, Matthew Golden ran that 4.29 percentile 40-yard dash at the combine. So the speed didn't look that way on tape, but he showed it in the combine. Big play, versatility, can line up across the formation, physical receiver after the catch, good ball skills. I think he'd be a nice add. Who do you see as a fit for the Seahawks?
Yeah, when it comes to Seattle, I like the thought of going for a wide receiver. They revamped that wide receiver room. They went younger. DK Metcalf's gone. Tyler Lockett's gone. And Cooper Kupp, as you said, how much does he really have left? So naturally, getting another wide out here on a rookie deal makes a lot of sense. I can also see Seattle possibly bringing in another cornerback, because that defense did overperform. I think it exceeded expectations last year, but offense. What do we know about Sam Darnold? When he had a really deep wide receiver and pass-catching group in Minnesota, he looked like an outstanding quarterback. Giving him some more weapons right now would be probably optimal for this team.
There's no doubt. Let's move to the San Francisco 49ers. We're going to be quick on the rest of the NFC West. The 49ers, in my mind, they do need to address defense. Greenlaw and Hufanga were gone in free agency. They have some other holes to fill there. Offensively, that line is not very good. Trent Williams is another year older, missed time with injury last year, well deep into his 30s. They have skill position players. I mean, McCaffrey's near the end. They still have Ayuk under contract. They have George Kittle. They have Jawan Jennings. They have Ricky Pearsall. I don't think that skill positions are a pressing need for them. Any thoughts on the 49ers?
No, this is a team that obviously went through a lot of turnover this offseason, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I can see them either addressing defensive needs or possibly trying to rework this offensive line. Trent Williams is getting up there and injury prone, and they also lost his backup who went over to Kansas City. So a left tackle could be the way to go.
There's no doubt. Now, the Rams, kind of the same deal. Look, the Rams are in good shape. They're already talking to Kyron Williams. Say what you will about them. They're talking about an extension, but they got Blake Corum. They picked up in the draft last year. At receiver, you got Puka Nacua. They brought in Devontae Adams. They've got other like Jordan Whittington, other players they can factor in here. I don't think the Rams are really going to be hunting out skill position players. Any thoughts on the Rams?
No, Rams, this is another team. They're fine with skill players. Young team, almost like Seattle, where this defense overperformed last year. Bolstering that side of the ball, Rams going defense would be the way to go here.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Let's move to the AFC West. We'll keep the divisions like West and West, East and East, and that way. We're going through a random order. I know a lot of people like to start with the North. We're not going to do that here today. All right, let's go with the Denver Broncos. You think they might need a running back, Anthony Cervino? You know Sean Payton wants to run the ball. They do have a good run-blocking offensive line, but last year, Javonte Williams just lost something after the injury a couple of years back. Jaleel McLaughlin, he showed flashes 2 years ago, not really a back they want to count on. Audric Estime was not what they thought he'd be. I really believe, and we've heard it actually leaked in the media, the Broncos need a lead running back because they don't want to put this whole thing on Bo Nix's shoulders. That's not what Sean Payton's about here. It's about a good running attack. So I think they picked 20th in the first round, and then they have pick at number 51 in the second round, 85 in the third. And I don't know draft capital wise if this is going to make sense, but if I was looking at them, I would look at Quinshon Judkins. Yeah. I really think Judkins with Sean Payton is a good mix. 6 foot 221. I see Judkins as a 3-down back. His 40-yard dash was 46th percentile, but remember, he's a 221-pound back, so he wasn't going to run an 80th percentile 40. He's a bigger back, so you're not going to have the blazing speed all the time. Sometimes that happens. In college, man, Judkins, 1,060 yards on 194 attempts, 5.5 yards per carry, 14 touchdowns, physical runner, fights for extra yards. He shows vision, and this is why I like him with Payton. You see the vision to see the running lanes. He finds, and that's what Payton's about, and I think that's a big deal. And we know he can catch some passes. Wasn't used heavily, but he can catch passes. That's my thought. Anthony, what are your thoughts on the Denver Broncos and their need?
Yeah, see, Denver's in a good spot. Pick 20, right? They need a running back. I also think they need a wide receiver when it comes to offensive skill positions. And where they are, like, is there a world, right? Because we know where the NFL views running backs, but we also know, hey, some teams will pick the running back early. I think there is a universe where maybe Genty falls. I think that's unlikely, but it could happen. Maybe Hampton falls. And if Hampton falls to pick 20, I think he's the guy that Denver could potentially go for.
Yeah, I like that as well. It's another very nice call. Let's move to the Kansas City Chiefs. And look, they're going to need offensive line help because at this point, they still have left tackle problems. And Patrick Mahomes is that one quarterback. Hit a tackle play is important for him. Think that Tom Brady back in the day, Brady needed interior help. Very different style of quarterback. They need offensive line help. But I think the Chiefs really need a power running back because defenses are always going to play the pass against Kansas City, and they need somebody to take the free yards that are there and keep defenses somewhat off balance. Now, the Chiefs picked 31st in the first round. I don't think they're taking a running back there. I can almost guarantee they won't. They have the 63rd pick, end of the second round, and then they come right back at the 66th pick in the third round. Then they don't pick again until 95. Now, I don't know how far he falls, and I don't know if he falls in 95, but I would like to see the Chiefs go at Ollie Gordon. They won't get one of the elite backs, the first ones, but Ollie Gordon, 6'1", 226. I see him as an early down grinder and a very nice compliment to Isaiah Pacheco. You don't want to overwork Pacheco. Pacheco's already shown durability issues, but if you split the work between a grinder back and Pacheco, it'd be a lethal 1-2 combination. Now, Gordon did not test well at the combine, but remember at 226, he wasn't wasn't going to have a good speed score. 5th percentile 40. It was terrible. But again, you weren't expecting him to be a speed demon. So no problem there. 22nd percentile explosiveness. That could have been better. Gordon led the nation with over 1,700 rushing yards and 21 touchdowns. So he had breaks tackles at a great rate. Very good balance when he gets hit. And we know at that size, workhorse potential. That's my fit. What do you think for the Chiefs, Anthony Cervino?
Yeah, I like that call, going running back potentially day 2, maybe day 3. You got to remember, the Chiefs have Pacheco coming back. He's finally going to be off that injury. They brought back Kareem Hunt. They also signed Eli Mitchell. Does that tell us, hey, we're ready to go into this season with what we have, and maybe we'll take a dart throw at a running back late, because this is another team. They have needs now on both sides of the football, especially on the offensive line. I remember going into this offseason, I thought, hey, Kansas City's going to go bring in a playmaking running back. And you said, hey, maybe, they really need an offensive lineman. So I think they're going to stress that this draft, offensive line, and potentially even the back end of their defense, which was a little bit vulnerable last year.
Let's go to the Los Angeles Chargers next. And I think they'll continue to work on their offensive line and their defense. Their defense played well, as well coached last year. Jim Harbaugh's staff did a real nice job, both on offense and defense with them. But I do think they wanted to bolster that defense. But I think offensively, look, and you may go the way of getting a complimentary receiver to McConkey, and I'd love if you do that, but I think they want a weapon at tight end. They have Will Dissly. They brought in Tyler Conklin, but they run a lot of heavy personnel sets. I think late in the draft, taking a flyer on a Rondé Gadsden II. Now, Gadsden 6'5", 223, super light. He really is like a receiver, but if you're running multiple tight end sets, he could be that move tight end. And I really think it would help. You already have McConkey who could play in the middle a little bit, but you could also move him out. He's hybrid. And I think having a weapon down the seam, if you have McConkey running underneath stuff, clearing out, and then you clear him out with Gadsden down the seam. I'd like to see a late pick. I mean, it's a crazy pick. I get it. Gadsden led Syracuse single season record with 73 catches, 934 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He was really good. He creates mismatches. If he is lined up as a tight end, he's going to be very difficult. He's going to be too fast for the linebackers. He's just going to be a mismatch. He's not the greatest player in the world. His hands are outstanding. I think Justin Herbert would like that. Runs routes extremely well. I know you got a different answer because mine is wild and out there. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, so when it comes to the Chargers, I know some people think, hey, they're going to bring in running back depth. It's not going to all go to Najee. I believe it's going to be the Najee Harris show this year when it comes to wide receiver, another position of need. Mike Williams. If we're going to talk about offensive skill players, I do think they upgrade pass catcher, and potentially in the first round, if Colston Loveland is still there, I think he's the guy they bring in. Yes, they have Dissly. Yes, they brought in Tyler Conklin, but Colston Loveland could be the top tight end, arguably, in this class. If he's there at 22, he can really bolster this offense.
Yeah, I had Loveland actually listed there. I had him listed to the Chargers. I decided to go with the late round pick, but Loveland was right there because Loveland kind of goes along the line with Gadsden, but obviously Loveland is a massive, massive upgrade over Gadsden. So if they want to use the early pick on that, I think you hit that, nails on that. He definitely would be the pick early if they want to use that early pick.
And a little conspiracy theory here. Greg Roman, when he was with Harbaugh in San Francisco, I believe he had Vernon Davis. I might be wrong there, but we know he had Mark Andrews. So they always had this elite pass catching tight end in this system.
There's no doubt. I like that. So I think that, like that, I had him listed there as well. I decided to get a little, crazier with mine. Let's go to the Raiders. And I'm trying not to repeat offensive players in this one, but I'm going to repeat a couple players. I'm not going to repeat them frequently, but the Raiders, look, Ashton Genty, they picked 6 in the first round. I don't know if the Raiders are going to pick him at 6, but the Raiders desperately need a running back. And look, Geno Smith's in his mid-30s, and I know they paid him a 2-year extension, but there is no way with that offensive line they can't give him a running game, because if he has no running game, Geno Smith's going to be under more pressure than ever. And Geno Smith's great. He'll stand there and he'll take the hit, but who are his receivers? And we know he's got the great tight end Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers, but who does he have? If they don't give him a run game, they are in massive trouble. Not that they're going to be in trouble either way. I think Genty would be a player at least gives them a chance. Go ahead, Anthony. What are your thoughts on the Raiders?
Yeah, this is a Raiders team. They need, as you said, skill position help. I think it's one of two guys at pick number 6. It's either going to be Genty, or I do see a world where Ted McMillan is the pick, 6'5", shifty, could play the slot. And you brought in Geno Smith. We know he's the king of garbage time yards. What do they really have to throw to? You have Bowers, you have Jacoby Myers. And then it's just a bunch of guys. If you want to open up this offense, I get bringing in Genty, but Ted McMillan could be a great addition and give Geno Smith a nice trio of weapons to work with.
Have you ever dreamed of managing your favorite pro football team? Do you watch your team and think the GM got it wrong? Again, do you think you can do better? Here's your chance to prove it. Introducing Ultra GM, a revolutionary new take on fantasy football that makes you the general manager of your favorite team. Start with the team's full roster and build it through the draft, free agency, trades, even the practice squad to create your ideal team. No fantasy football platform or GM simulator has ever provided this degree of realism and engagement that Ultra GM offers, and none has ever given you the opportunity to manage the team that you love and care for the most. Compete against family, friends, even your team's real GM to see who is the Ultra GM. You think you can do better than your team's GM? Visit ultragm.com to prove it. All right, Anthony, we are moving on to the NFC South. Atlanta Falcons. Look, the Falcons have invested first-round picks, quarterback, running back, tight end, bust, whatever, wide receiver. They've invested first-round picks for a long time. At this point, Ray McLeod's our number 3. I think that if there's going to be a move here, Michael Penix be the quarterback this year, I really think you want to upgrade that wide receiver 3. Their offensive line's good. They could get depth. They definitely need defensive help. But I think if we're going to go in the later rounds, like the 4th round, I think this player is going to fall there. He may not. Who knows, right? Jalen Royals. I think Jalen Royals at 6'2", 205. He's a slot or a stretch Z, but he's a speed guy. And I think what this would do is, remember, Drake London can do anything as the X, but he's a bigger body underneath, and you got Darnell Mooney. But I think if you could attack defenses from the middle and stretch them, I think a player like Jalen Royals, now he ran only a 60th percentile 40. He looked faster than that on his college film, and I saw him as a player with great hands, route running, very quick and sharp and efficient in and out of his breaks, which really would work well if they move him to the slot. And like I said earlier, you can move him inside or outside depending on the situation. That would be, for me, this is not a priority ad. They would be fine with what they have. Any thoughts on the Falcons?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty vanilla draft, boring draft for Atlanta. When you see some of the losses, key losses they had, Grady Jarrett, Drew Gallman, I think this is going to be focused on replacing those guys.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. The Carolina Panthers are next. So basically, you've got Xavier Legette, and we don't know what he is yet. The team, of course, is saying all the right things, like he's their guy. I always worry about this big outside guy and the arm of their quarterback, but they're going to have to give Bryce Young weapons. And right now, we don't know what Legette is. Adam Thielen, mid-30s, missed time last year again. Yes, he's reliable. Jalen Coker looked decent as a rookie, but we really don't know what he is yet. So I think realistically, even though the arm concerns of Bryce Young, I think they need a vertical presence in this offense. I think Legette is an underneath guy. Thielen's an underneath guy. So I'm going to go downfield. I'm going to go with Ty Felton. And I think Ty Felton is 6'1", 183. He ran an 82nd percentile 40. His percentiles for explosiveness, 88th percentile. This is a player that at least give them an ability to stretch the defense a little bit. We saw last year Felton had 96 catches, 1,124 yards, 9 touchdowns, only 11.7 yards per catch. But I think he could be better utilized at the NFL level. He is a very smooth and fluid route runner, gets separation, and that's the important thing that we like. The speed, like we said earlier, stretching the defenses, very good hands, yards after the catch. He's shown the ability to create there. I think this would be a good weapon for Bryce Young. What are your thoughts for the Carolina Panthers, Anthony?
Yeah, I think that these early rounds, I actually have them projected to go with an edge rusher like Mike Green. But do they need a wide receiver? Absolutely. If you look at their wide receiver room, a couple of nice young guys that people in the dynasty community get excited about. But outside of that, it is, we're looking at Adam Thielen again. You said we don't know what Legette is. He seems like a fun guy, but I don't know if he's it. If I'm Carolina, I'm probably drafting a wide receiver in the first round. I just don't see it happening. But at some point, you would think they have to bring somebody in.
Yeah, there's no doubt. We'll move to the New Orleans Saints, and I really think first and foremost, offensive line and defense are their big needs. I do think, though, in the later rounds, I do think they need to go with the running back position. That receiver, they got Olave. We don't know the concussion, but they're happy with him. They're fine there. And Rashid Shaheed really came on. So I think that 1-2 punch are okay. They signed Juwan Johnson for 3 more years, $30 million. So they got him back. I think they're going to need a grinder running back. And again, this is a later round player I'm talking about, Taj Brooks. I think Alvin Kamara, look, he's still doing what he can. He's the best he can be, but he really needs a transition to a receiving role. And I know they extended his contract. Move him into a receiving role. Stop overworking the guy. Kendre Miller, look, I was all excited about him, but right now, not real convinced he's going to be anything. So a later round on Taj Brooks, 5'9", 214. Like I said, he's an early down grinder. The testing at the combine, when you're 214, you're not expecting a lot. 36 percentile 40. That's in line with his size. 27th percentile explosiveness, not great. His agility drills were actually great. 100th percentile. That was surprising. And that's why I end up liking him. Early down back with a little bit of wiggle. And I think that would be a nice compliment for Kamara. Brooks ran for 1,505 yards, 5.3 yards per carry, and 17 touchdowns last year. But again, good vision, a durable back. Doesn't fumble the ball. That's really important. I think that would be a good compliment. Anthony, what are your thoughts on the New Orleans Saints?
Yeah, when it comes to the Saints, they bring in Kellen Moore, who I'm a big fan of. I like their skill players. Can you make a case? Yeah, they extended Alvin Kamara. I think there's a case to be made, and there's a long shot pick here in Ashton Genty if he's there. I think that conversation could be had if he does slip past the Raiders for a lot of these upcoming teams. But the Saints, Derek Carr, he took a beating. I think, when you're looking at the early round, somebody like Kelvin Banks or Will Campbell is where I have them going. I see them maybe addressing skill players on day 3.
Yes. Now let's move to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Anthony, I don't think they need a skill position player here. I know Mike Evans is getting older, and Chris Godwin, they just signed to a contract, and he's 29. Jalen McMillan's in there. They got K-Dot in the tight end. They got running back, the Harris said, Bucky Irving, and they got Rashad White and even Sean Tucker to a degree. So I really don't think they right now need to address the skill positions. So I think this is an offensive line and defense draft. Anything on the Buccaneers?
No, or defense. Again, that defense was their Achilles heel last season. They couldn't stop anybody for a while. So, hammering the defensive side of the ball is probably the optimal way to go for Tampa.
It is. And even on the offensive line, the tackles are great. I mean, they were wonderful at protecting Baker Mayfield. And even the center they drafted last year, I think Graham Barton, if that comes at the mind of the first. So it would be like guard help, but that's not a priority. The line is good. Like you said, if they just spend a lot of darts on defense, that's really what they need, because the offense is probably going to be good even without Liam Cohen coaching them this year. Let's move to another division, Anthony. We're going to go to the AFC South. We're going to start with the Houston Texans. And yes, the offensive line was catastrophic, and they definitely need offensive line help. But if they feel that it was just an off year for the line, because they had some talented players that just didn't pan out, and I know they traded away Laramie Tunsil, and that was horrible. They don't pick till 25th in the first round, and so that's going to be interesting what they could get there. And I don't know if this player will fall there. This was the landing spot I decided on for Colston Loveland. Because think about CJ Stroud. You got Nico Collins, and you're not going to have Tank Dell probably this year. It's probably not going to happen. But they brought Christian Kirk in for the slot. But, man, imagine adding Colston Loveland to that group. That would be fun. A massive upgrade over Dalton Schultz. That's not even close. And I just think at 6'5", 245, the movable chess piece, it would keep defenses off, and it would be less predictable against C.J. Stroud, where teams were able to attack him a bit last year. And then if they have Loveland and then Tank Dell comes back next year, wow, you're really talking about a core. Anyway, the strengths for Loveland, elite athleticism, moves like a wide receiver, strong hands. Again, you could move him anywhere without a problem, and hopefully he's not Kyle Pitts. But that said, I'm excited. What are your thoughts on the Houston Texans, Anthony?
Yeah, this is another team I see maybe a little bit of a boring draft when it comes to fantasy football. They need a lot of help in the trenches on defense, in their front seven. Losing Laramie Tunsil, CJ Stroud without protection. We saw this happen last year when Tunsil was down. He does not look good. And if they don't heavily address this offensive line, I think CJ Stroud's going to take a beating. So I have them going best available tackle in the first round.
Michael had a question for us. We just talked about the Buccaneers a moment ago, so we could circle back this one. Will Sean Tucker take over the running back 2 spot for Rachaad White? What I say is this: Rachaad White, the playoff game and then the game before that, his snaps were like cut down to almost nil. And it was like Bucky Irving was like the guy. It really depends what the Buccaneers want. If they want to be their number 2 running back to be the receiving complement, it'll be Rachaad White. If they want the number 2 running back to be more involved as a grinder back, it's going to be Sean Tucker. It really is personal preference on the coaching staff. And with Liam Cohen gone, we're not sure how that's going to go. They are 2 very different players, Tucker and White. They're good in different ways, and they have weaknesses in other areas. So to answer this question right now, I would assume Rachaad White goes in with a slight leg up. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Anthony?
Yeah, I'm in on the Rachaad White camp. Again, down the stretch, as you said, they minimize his workload, but it's not like they were using Sean Tucker either. It was the Bucky Irving show. But there is also a comfort factor that when Bucky was down, Rachaad White can play the position. We've seen him take over that role 2 years ago before Bucky Irving was even there. And even last year when Bucky went down, Rachaad White once again took over as a premier back. I'm not saying that Sean Tucker is not capable, but Baker Mayfield, he needs that running back to check down to.
There's no question about that. Let's go to the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, skill position. You got Jonathan Taylor at running back. Receivers, you got Michael Pittman, Josh Downs. You've got Adonai Mitchell they brought in. You've got Alec Pierce, who played well. The quarterback's obviously a problem there, and we don't know if it'd be Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson. The offensive line, they did lose a couple pieces, and they could go there. If they're going to take any offensive skill position, and I know they have a lot of tight ends on their roster. They got Drew Ogletree. They got Will Mallory. I don't think they've shown much of anything. Kylan Granson's gone. If they're going to go later on a tight end for a possession receiver, because they really, those quarterbacks, they're going to need some more possession help. It would be Jalen Conyer, 6'4", 260. Combine, the speed wasn't good, 46th percentile 40, but his agility was 100th percentile, 69th percentile explosiveness. That makes him a really good possession target. I don't think this is a priority add for them in any way, but I think if they're going to do something later, it'd be that. But I really think offensive line replenishment and defense are the way to go. Anthony, anything on the Colts?
Yeah, I think you said it right. Interior offensive line after losing Freeze and Ryan Kelly. I do think there's a world where, like you said, the tight end position, if one of these top end talents are there, I see some mocks have Warren falling. If Warren's there when the Colts are picking, I think he might be the slam dunk pick, because year after year, we're banking on Mo Alley Cox and Kylan Granson. It's not happening with those guys.
No, it is not happening with those guys. And yeah, it's so funny because they have the biggest tight end room in the entire NFL, and they have nobody. No offense to those guys. They're obviously professional players, but for fantasy, they are not moving the needle at all. Let's go to the Jacksonville Jaguars next. So they need, in my mind, a Z receiver. Again, Brian Thomas is the X. He'll line up on the line, take the tighter coverage, win in any way from that. The Z is off the line, a little bit free release. Now, they currently have Brian Thomas. We said they have Gabe Davis, who got hurt last year. I'm not sold on Gabe Davis or anything. They have De'Ami Brown, who I'm interested in. I think that what he showed in the playoffs and Liam Cohen coaching him, I think there's some untapped potential, but I think this team needs a big-time receiver on the opposite side of Brian Thomas. I think Trey Harris is a player that they could target. 6'2", 205. I didn't like his 40 time, but I don't need him as a stretch Z. I need him as a possession Z, a good complement to Brian, because Brian Thomas is great at getting downfield. So 24th percentile 40, but he was 69th percentile explosiveness. That tells me he can get open quickly, especially when he's going to be off the line as a Z. He had 17.2 yards per catch, 1,030 yards last year, which was solid. He was a very good receiver in terms of hands. He rarely dropped passes. Size, he's a big target, strong frame. That's what his quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, is going to need. Very physical fighting defenders. These are positives, and it's an outstanding compliment in my mind to Brian Thomas Jr. Anthony, what are you thinking for the Jacksonville Jaguars?
I mean, this is a team that needs help. It seems like everywhere New system coming in, new GM coming from the Rams system. Liam Cohen, obviously, the new head coach. They have some talent. They have some nice skill talent. But where I really saw this team struggle last year defensively, they could not stop the run. I think, early, and there's some nice skill players here where they can draft with the 5th overall pick. I see them going a nice, safe run stopper like Mason Graham, and maybe we see this team address the wide receiver position on day 2, maybe day 3. Tight end's another need, but I like Brenton Strange. I don't see them making a splash there.
Agreed on that 100%. So our last team of the AFC South is the Tennessee Titans. And look, they need everything. Their running back's okay. I mean, they're fine there. Although they need a grinder back. They have 2 like fast backs, Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. So they might need something there. But Calvin Ridley's hit 30 already. Their next best receiver is probably Chico Conquo, a tight end. They're a mess. I know they got Van Jefferson on the roster. Oh my goodness! Like, when's the madness going to stop? But I think ultimately the 101. I just think they have to take Cam Ward. I don't think Cam Ward's going to be a great quarterback. I think he's maybe at best a top 20 NFL starter. But ultimately, you got the 1 pick or the 2 pick. I don't 1 pick. I'm sorry, and you got to take your dart. You have to just take your shot. There's no other quarterback in this draft they could consider. Will Levis, obviously, that ship has long sailed. I just think they have to go there, Anthony.
Yeah, it's going to be Cam Ward. But what the Bears did last year, bringing in Caleb Williams, they also drafted Roma Dunze. Now, the Titans aren't in that position where they have 2 high first-round picks, but in the second round, right, I get this team has a lot of needs. If they get Cam Ward 1, maybe if somebody like Emeka Egbuka is there when they pick in the second round, or one of these other top receivers that could fall, I'm drafting my quarterback and a potential wide receiver of the future with my first 2 picks.
And I know we've all given up on Treylon Burks, and he's been injured a lot. I don't know if he has anything in the tank. It would be nice to see him, but at this point, they probably got a sale from him as well. So you're probably right in going that route.
And they lost Ikene too. So that's a really bare bone room.
Yeah, was he like 9 touchdowns on 32 catches or something like that? Pretty insane. All right, we will talk more free rookie landing spots after we take a short break. All right, let's go to the AFC North. We start with the Baltimore Ravens. Anthony, they don't need any skill position player help. They just need extra help on the offensive line, maybe bolster the defense. I don't think they're in the market for offensive players. Thoughts?
Nope. Ravens defensive side of the ball. That was their Achilles heel in the postseason when they got bounced. I get you can blame a lot of Mark Andrews, but they couldn't really stop Buffalo at times. So I'm addressing that side of the ball.
Cincinnati Bengals. We know the defense is a disaster, and we know they probably need to address it. They can't fix that defense in the draft. They picked 17th. They have the 49th pick overall in the second round. And in the second round, I assume this player will easily be there. Maybe even in the third round in the 81st pick. If I'm the Bengals, I'm basically going all out on offense. I'm going to try to outscore everybody because I got Burrow, I got Chase, I got Higgins, but I want to keep putting the pedal to the metal. And I know Mike Gesicki, the tight end, they re-upped him, and they're going to use him as a slot receiver type, but they're inconsistent with that usage. I want to see them add a slot receiver to stretch defenses. Because if the defenses sag in with Chase and Higgins, I want somebody to bust them over the top. So I like Isaiah Bond as that vertical element. 5'11", 180, ran a 76th percentile 40. I would have liked that to be a little bit higher, but I do think he's been dangerous in space. He could turn short catches into bigger gains. He also can make defenders miss, but I do think with the attention on Chase and Higgins, he has the requisite speed, I think, to stretch from the slot. What do you see for the Bengals?
Yeah, for Cincinnati, I again, I'm a boring guy. Rebuild this offensive line, rebuild this defense, but take your shots later. I like your thought process with the wide receiver. Do you see a world where they bring in, because this has fantasy implications? I'm a big fan of Chase Brown. They brought in Samaje Perine. I think that running back room is fine the way it is. Do you see it otherwise? That's one of my questions I have.
I know their organization already made some like loose comment about they want to bring in another back. They don't want, and you see, and I think it's a mistake. When Chase Brown came out of Illinois 2 years ago, Anthony, I'm on record as saying he's got three down back size. Yeah. He is not a little back. I don't know why everybody like perceives him. He's not a tiny back. he can do this. We saw Alvin Kamara at 215 playing 3 downs forever. Chase Brown could play 3 downs. We'll see what they end up doing. And Zach Moss was obviously, as we knew, a bust, and that he got hurt as well. So, but yeah, they definitely could do that. But I think that would be a mistake of a pick, unless it's a day 3 pick, and then at that point, who cares, right? Cleveland Browns. Obviously, they need a quarterback. They need a running back terribly. Nick Chubb's gone. Their running back room is Jerome Ford and Pierre Strong. That ain't getting it done for anybody. I don't think picking at 2, I don't think that Shedeur Sanders is the answer. I don't think there's any quarterback at that point who is. So I'm going to say Cam Scatterbo, maybe in the 3rd round, 2nd round, 33rd pick, 3rd round, 67th pick. Not sure where he'll fall. Cam Scatterbo, 5'10", 219. I see him as an early down back, but I also see him as somebody who can contribute in the passing game, goal line. Last year, 1,711 yards on 293 attempts, 21 touchdowns, shown durability, power. He breaks tackles so well. I love the vision. And Kevin Stefanski probably gets back to his roots coaching this year. Probably use a little more of the zone run. I think Scatterbo is a real nice player for that. And we also saw Scatterbo could pass protect, and that'll certainly help any quarterback they have under center. I'm not going to predict who their quarterback is on day 1. Anthony, thoughts on the Browns?
Yeah, revamping this running back room. They had Chubb and Hunt for so many years when they were successful. We know Hunt's been gone. Nick Chubb is on his way out. They're not bringing him back. It's not happening with the 1st round pick. I think your team like Cleveland, get the best player available, maybe even a Travis Hunter with that number 2 overall pick. But in the 2nd or 3rd round, certainly best running back on the board. I like Jerome Ford, but outside of Jerome Ford, they have a bunch of guys in that running back room. When it comes to, you have Njoku, you have wide receivers. I think that wide receiver room is very underrated. The big skill position on offense that sticks out is running back.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Like you said, Jerome Ford's a nice piece, but I don't think you could build a running game around him. And I think they really need to go that route, because if your quarterback's position is going to be rough, and we mentioned this, I can't remember which team it was earlier, and I made the point of saying you got to have a running game. It was for Geno Smith, who's a good quarterback. But if you don't have a running game, you're just telling teams, well, we have to pass, and that's never a good situation. Let's move to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Steelers, obviously, they brought in DK Metcalf. I don't know what George Pickens' long-term future is there. I can't really speak to that. I do know at some point they're probably going to kick a running back. Jaylen Warren, I don't see him as a guy that could be a heavy volume back in this Arthur Smith offense. But I still have to address quarterback, because right now, Mason Rudolph's their guy, and they're hoping Aaron Rodgers wants to play. Aaron Rodgers, you could tell, Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to play there, because he knows that those are downfield passes they want to throw with Metcalf and Pickens. That means he's going to get hit. And you could watch last year. He on that ball out quick, and that ain't going to happen in Arthur Smith's offense. So I don't think he may force to go there. So I think at some point they're going to take a shot on Jackson Dart as quarterback. Now, he needs to develop. I get that. But in Arthur Smith's offense, it's very simple with the play action, multiple tight ends, multiple running backs. It's very set up for quarterback success. He's a very athletic quarterback. They can move him in and out of the pocket. They tried that with Justin Fields a bit last year. He has a big arm. That's why I like him, Anthony, because you got Metcalf, you got Pickens. And if you're going to throw play action and you're going to protect him, this could work. His mechanics got better throughout his career, and that helps. Now, he's not a great decision maker, but again, Arthur Smith's offense may take care of that for him. Any thoughts on the Steelers?
Yeah, when it comes to the Steelers, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. I also think when it comes to running back, they're at the landing spot for Dobbins or Chubb. And I've said that now for a few weeks.
Love it.
When it comes to when they draft quarterback, I don't know how you feel outside of Cam Ward. Like, if this wasn't such a quarterback-driven league, I don't even know if Cam Ward's a top 10 pick.
Correct.
I think this is going to be like Shedeur Sanders should be there when the Steelers pick number 21 overall. And if he is, I think that's the dart throw at quarterback. We saw them do it with Kenny Pickett a few years ago. I think they take a shot if somebody like Shedeur Sanders, who's arguably the second best quarterback in this draft, if he is there at 21, I think that's the way they go.
And you may be right. My concern, especially with Sanders, he doesn't have a deep arm. He can't drive the ball deep down his line. My comp on Sanders, and I'll talk about him a little bit later, is Tua Tagovailoa. That's my comp on him, because he's very precise. He could get the ball, he can laser you in the middle of the field. But driving the ball to the perimeter, Tua can't do that. And I don't think
Yep.
Sanders. And I think with Metcalf and Pickens, I think that's like oil and water. That's just my thought. I could be wrong, but unless I'm wrong on Sanders' arm strength, which, again, my word isn't always going to be the right one. There's a lot of voices way smarter than me out there. But again, I like the idea. I just don't know that he fits, but we'll see. Let's go to the NFC North, Anthony, and let's go with the Bears. So the Bears bring in Ben Johnson to coach the team and run the offense. They upgraded their offensive line significantly. Drew Dalman at center, Jonah Jackson right guard, a down year last year, Joe Tooney left guard. We know they have the two tackles, Darnell Wright, who they drafted 10th the year before, Braxton Jones, who really has been great as a fifth-round pick a few years back. This line could become something, but I think DeAndre Swift cannot be your lead guy. I think we learned in Philly when he played behind that great line, his numbers were decent, but he did not do anything close to what should have been done. I think if Ashton Genty falls to 10, I think Ben Johnson wants to do everything he can to recreate the success he had in Detroit. And by having an elite running game, you got DJ Moore, you got Romo Dunze, you got Caleb Williams. I think this would give him a potential to have a dynamic offense day one. I don't need to say much about Genty, 3 down back. I talked about him earlier. I talked about the Raiders, so I won't repeat all of that. Anthony, thoughts on the Bears?
Yeah, I'm with you here. I think the Bears are going to get a running back early. First round, I do see them because I don't know if Cleveland's going to make their pick, right? Maybe the Bears move up. They have some draft capital. They'll get somebody like Abdul Carter, number 2 overall. I could see that to really bolster that defense. But if they still have that second round pick, maybe that's where they go running back. Travion Henderson in this offense, he's another explosive runner. I think he also fits that Jameer, obviously not the talent of Gibbs, but fits that mold. So I think Henderson in the second round for Chicago is very much in play if they don't go the Genty round.
Right. I totally love that because there's a great chance they don't use a first round pick. A lot of teams would never, ever, ever do that. So that would be a very good fallback option. Now, the Lions, Packers, and Vikings, Anthony, look, they have very good skill position players. The Packers, you could question the receiver group, but I think overall they're happy with what they have. They all have quarterback situations that are to their, J.J. McCarthy is drafted by the Vikings. I just think all those 3 teams, it's offensive line and defense. So I don't have anything for those 3. Do you have anything with those 3 to say? Lions, Packers, Vikings?
I'm with you. All of those teams are more than rich when it comes to offensive skill position players. I think the only curveball I throw there is Green Bay and a wide receiver. I don't think that wide receiver room has a number 1 wide receiver in it.
Correct.
And at some point, you got to bring one in.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. That could happen. All right, let's go to our last set of divisions, the AFC East. We're going to start out with the Buffalo Bills. The Bills picked 30th in the first round. They have 2 later second round picks, 56 and 62. Now, I don't think this player falls to the 30 pick, but I think if the Bills really want to prioritize, they could make a trade up, and the Bills are known to make some deals. So I'm going to say Matthew Golden. And I sent him somewhere else earlier, but the Bills could use Matthew Golden. He ran that 4.29 40. Think about the Bills last year. And we said this preseason, Anthony, I was really frustrated. The Bills had nobody to open up the field. And that was a problem. You got Keon Coleman. I get it. You can send him downfield, but he's not fast. And they got Khalil Shakir in the slot. They brought in Joshua Palmer, whatever, Curtis Samuel. You need speed. Josh Allen has a howitzer for an arm. You bring in Matthew Golden. You threaten that defense vertically. It gives you more space underneath. Thoughts on the Bills?
Yeah, I think optimally bringing in another pass catcher. Yes, they brought in Josh Palmer. He's really just a guy. They really need that weapon to put this team over the top. I get everybody says they have a number 1 offense in the regular season. Well, in the postseason, they can't get over that hump. Maybe that big play wide receiver is what they're missing. Otherwise, maybe replenishing the defensive side of the ball a little bit is the way I go with Buffalo.
Now, the Miami Dolphins, Teron Armstead just retired. And given his career, he was a little bit durable in Miami, which is something he couldn't say in New Orleans. But there's a big problem on that offensive line, and they don't need skill position help at all. They're not going to address quarterback. They got Tua, whatever. There's nobody in this draft that you're going to replace with anyway. So I just think it's offensive line and defense for the Dolphins. How about you, Anthony?
Yeah, I agree here.
All right, let's go to the Patriots. The Patriots need a lot of everything. They brought in Stephon Diggs. They're spending some money. look, they need a lot of things. The one thing I will say is they do probably want a receiving back. We know that Ramondre Stevenson had that 1 year, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where he just caught a ton of passes. It was like Steven Jackson. For those who are older, way back in the day with the Rams, when he got 90 passes, he never sniffed like half of that the rest of his career. And that's kind of been a little bit what we've seen of him throughout. So let's give a receiving back to them. And it's not going to be an early round pick. Trevor Etienne, I think at 5'198, 82nd percentile 40. The explosive is 43rd percentile, not great, but he has good contact balance, good vision, very good receiver. I think he'd be a very good complementary back. This is not like a priority pick, but I think it's a way they could go. What were you thinking with the Patriots, Anthony?
Yeah, bolstering that running back room should also be a priority here. If they're picking day 2, maybe second or third round for this running back, maybe Etienne, maybe something like Rashard Smith out of SMU.
Yeah, I like that. That'd be an excellent choice for them as well. Michael was asking about Jaden Higgins of Buffalo. Certainly could see that. I certainly could see that. The reason I like Golden is the 4.29 40. I just thought the fastest guy would probably be the one thing that would make everybody on that offense better. It's almost like old school football. Old school football was you had that speed demon to take the top off and open up space because like John Madden said, the late John Madden, speed kills. Defenses always have to respect speed. And he doesn't even need to see a lot of targets. He could just use his speed to make everybody better. But I certainly could see Jaden Higgins there. Anthony, anything on that?
No, I agree.
All right. No, the Jets, and I know Michael in the chat pointed out earlier something about the Jets drafting Warren to go with Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. So with the Jets, they pick 7th, then they pick 42nd in the second round, 73rd in the third round. I think, look, we got Garrett Wilson, and I know last year, you got Xavier Gibson, you got Malachi Corley, you got a lot of questions. They got Alan Lazard on the roster, and I know the quarterback is Justin Fields, and we really don't know what we have from him. I just think at this point, you know what? If you're going to give your offense any chance, you already got Breece Hall and other Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen in the backfield. I think you bring in Luther Burden. I think you go with 2 great receivers here and you give Justin Fields a chance because you're going to have to probably shrink the field for many weeks. He can't read an entire field. So if you use him on rollouts, if you give him 2 great receivers, now he has a chance of whichever way you roll. The defense can't overplay a side because they could roll left or they could roll right. And you really could at least throw a bit in this. Luther Burden, 6 foot 206, is 40 time for 206 with 63rd percentile. It was fine. He's great at yards after the catch. Route runner, sharp, explosive cuts, gets space easily. Hands were very good. He doesn't drop passes. Playmaker. I think giving Fields 2 playmakers work. Anthony, what do you see for the Jets?
Yeah, the Jets moved up and Tyler Conklin. I see them going in on a tight end. They obviously passed on Bowers last year. Whether it's Tyler Warren with the first round pick or somebody like Gunnar Helm on day 2, I think the tight end position is going to be addressed by New York.
They definitely, and the tight end would be a good move also for Fields to give him more of a security blanket underneath. So I definitely think that could work as well. So let's go to our last division, the NFC East. You got the Cowboys. And Anthony, look, the Cowboys are a team in some ways in transition, but I really think they are desperate for a lead running back here. Brian Schottenheimer's a coach. He's going to do some old school running the football. So I think Travion Henderson, 5'10", 202, good size, not great size, but good size. Yeah. 73rd percentile 40, 80th percentile explosiveness, 7.1 yards per carry last year. Explosive, great vision, big play threat, lower body strength. All these things together, I think even behind a poor offensive line, he could mask some problems. Thoughts on the Cowboys?
Yeah, I think obviously offensive line's a big need for Dallas, but so is running back. If Gentry is not there, one of these 2 Ohio State running backs, whether it's Henderson or Judkins, that's where Zeke played. Jerry knows that is a running back factory. I can see one of those 2 Ohio State backs in Dallas.
The New York Giants. Look, I'm just going to, at the 103, I'm just going to say this. This team doesn't have a quarterback. They need a quarterback. I don't think the world of Shedeur Sanders. You heard me talk earlier. Yep. I compliment Tua, but I think at least Brian Daboll's coaching for his job, and I know the general manager's coaching for his job, and they got to take something. And so I think Shedeur Sanders is their pick, and I think they just craft an underneath offense and just smoke and mirrors it up like they did with Daniel Jones a few years ago. Thoughts on the Giants, Anthony?
Yeah, I see them at least early going somebody like Travis Hunter. I just don't see Shedeur Sanders as the top 10 pick. And this is also a Giants team. You got to protect whoever that quarterback is. Going with an offensive line, maybe a day 3 running back to bolster that room. But I kind of like that skill position room in New York.
Absolutely. The Philadelphia Eagles,
Yeah.
they want to bolster their line. Great. They want to add to their defense. Definitely. They don't need anything at the skill positions.
Nope.
Anything on the Eagles?
Nope, I agree.
All right, last team, Washington Commanders. This is going to be a weak pick. The offensive line is a priority, and they really need talent on defense. They played well. They were coached well last year. They need talent. But if they're going to add a receiver, you got McLaurin, you got Debo, who probably would be best served in the slot. So you want to bring in a Z receiver. Later in the draft, Jack Beck, 6'1", 214, is a Z receiver, possession, a little bit slow, 36% agility. But I think later on, he's a physical receiver, and I think they need a physical guy. Good hands. I think that's all they need. So it's a weak pick, but that's what I'm giving them. Anything on the Commanders?
Yeah, offensively, I think they can use a wide receiver. I think they can use, skill players as depth. Work on the trenches, work on the defensive side of the ball. I think getting that defense intact might be the way to go if they want to make a strong push to the NFC, championship.
There's no doubt. All right, be a part of the RotoWire community on our new and improved Discord server. You share fantasy advice, find a prop bet detail, and interact with some of your favorite RotoWire experts. You join the conversation at rotowire.com/chat. And remember, RotoWire covers all fantasy sports, and you can get a free 2-day trial. You don't need a credit card to check it all out. Just go to rotowire.com/pod. Check us out. If you like it, join the team. If not, we're just happy you took a look and saw what we were all about. We want to thank our sponsor, Ultra GM, and thanks to everyone for listening. Make sure you come back next week as we get closer to the NFL draft for another edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast.